Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Saturday evening, November 13th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska. Well, let's get right to the weather headlines. A fair number of things are happening. Most of all, we've definitely had some cold weather, and that is going to continue. We have a couple areas of low pressure in the Bering with a occluded front that'll be tracking eastward through the central and eastern Aleutians on Sunday, bringing some gustier winds and showers with it. High pressure will remain over the interior with cold temperatures, and high pressure will continue to build throughout the interior as we head through the upcoming week. Meanwhile, the next Gulf low pressure system will kind of spin up as a result of that eastern Aleutian front working its way into the North Pacific, and that could bring some more rain and particularly some significant snow to the northern half of the Panhandle Tuesday evening into Wednesday. Otherwise, no relief from the cold. We're looking for below normal temperatures to continue through mid-month, right up through prior to Thanksgiving. Well, looking at some FAA webcam pictures this afternoon, we had some scattered coastal snow showers with a low pressure that's off of the Kenai Peninsula there at Seward. And as we get into the interior of the Southwest, Antioch enjoyed clear skies, some later day sun, but cold temperatures with lows tonight getting down below zero. And looking at the satellite imagery, there's a couple areas of low pressure in the Gulf, one in the northwest just off the Kenai Peninsula and another one south of Haida And not especially potent, but still keeping some precipitation going there, mainly in the form of some coastal snow showers. And then back to the west, you can see curling the clouds off the Kamchatka Peninsula on the far left side of your screen, as well as just west of Adak. And that is an occluded front that'll be working its way through the central and eastern Aleutians overnight and through the day on Sunday. Further north and west, we have weak trough along the northwest Arctic coast, along the Chukchi Sea, bringing some snow showers, and then high pressure that is centered along the Yukon River there and through the interior west of Fairbanks, and that's going to be a feature that keeps the cold air in place, and some temperatures that could be getting down to as cold as 25 to 30 below zero across portions of east central areas extending westward Bettles and Selawik as we head into the upcoming week. More cold air is going to settle in through the interior and northwest Canada. So there's the low located just southeast there of the Seward, I should say southeast of the Kenai Peninsula, and another low there kind of south of Haida Gwaii and southwest of Vancouver. And then as we go back to the west, there's low pressure off the Kamchatka Peninsula with the occluded front working its way into the central Aleutians tonight and early tomorrow morning. High pressure in place over the central Yukon Valley in the interior is going to allow for cold sub-zero temperatures, at least 10 to 20 below tonight. And there's also, just to pass along, a stage 2 air quality alert for Fairbanks and North Pole. As a result, we get this colder surface air setup with high pressure. We get a temperature inversion, and that makes for rather poor air quality. Don't really see a change in that coming up here as we go into the early part of next week. But otherwise, by Sunday, we still have low pressure out there over the central Gulf, producing a few rain snow showers along at least the southern half of the Panhandle coast, and then pockets of some light snow or flurries in through northern parts of the state with a double barrel low out over the Bering, and that occluded front working its way eastward through the eastern Aleutians. In the wake of it, some rather strong winds. Western half of the Aleutians will create some low-level turbulence for aviation interest, and by Monday, high pressure expands from off of the northeastern Russian coast down through the Alaska interior into northwest Canada. As the energy shifts a little further south and east there across the Alaska Peninsula, we're going to see a new low spin up just off of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific by later Monday and especially Tuesday. That'll be the next weather system that could bring potentially some more significant snowfall to parts of the northern panhandle here Tuesday evening into Wednesday. So low Sunday morning, generally just above freezing there in the southern panhandle. Otherwise could be down around 8-10 below at Glen Allen. And single digits at Kenai and Anchorage, extending down into the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise holding on to the lower 20s there at Kodiak. And Sunday afternoon highs generally in the teens, Anchorage on over toward Cordova Valdez, but only 6 above at McGrath and Glen Allen, with highs still up around 40 there in the southern and southwestern panhandle. Lows Monday morning, though, could be easily down around 15 below at Glen Allen, 5, 6 above at Anchorage, and still holding up there near the water there in the lower mid-20s there off Kodiak. And high temperatures Monday afternoon will generally be in the teens, at least along within the coast across the south central interior, but still around the 30s to 40 there in the panhandle. And going further north, we see lows extensively below zero now, with some areas south slopes of the Brooks Range and between there and the Yukon River in the 15 to even 25 below range, still up around 20 there in the west end of the Seward Peninsula. Highs generally single digits and teens for Sunday afternoon, and then Monday morning we could see again lows across the Yukon Valley between the Alaska Range and the Brooks Range, well below zero, with temperatures Monday afternoon staying sub-zero in those areas, but generally in the teens along the Arctic coast, the west coast there of the Seward Peninsula. And looking at the southwest interior, lows getting down below zero tonight, generally 5 to 10 below, pretty common. Seeing readings above freezing as you get out toward the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and through the eastern Aleutians westward. Sunday afternoon temperatures will struggle to reach the single digits there across the interior west of the Alaska Range. 17 at Eamonnok for a high, and about 12 or so as we get on over toward Aniak. And then as we go into the day, Monday morning, lows again sub-zero across the southwest interior, generally above freezing from Cold Bay westward out through the length of the Aleutian chain. And then Monday afternoon highs will remain in the single digits across the interior, especially up the middle upper Kuskokwim River basin. And highs otherwise lower 20s along the southwest coast and 40s as that occluded front works its way eastward. Taking a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, statewide temperatures are expected to average below normal November 19th through the 23rd, just prior to Thanksgiving, with the greatest potential for below normal temperatures across the west-southwest portions of the state. Precipitation should average, though, below normal across much of the west, northwest, and north. But precipitation could end up being a bit above normal there, especially through the panhandle, as we do expect a couple areas of low pressure that could fling some more significant moisture in that direction. And that wraps it up. It's still looking rather cold here as we head through mid-month.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now for your flying weather, and if you have a flight planned Sunday into Monday, the main weather features here as we go through the latter half of the weekend will be surface high pressure extending from eastern Russia on across the central interior of Alaska into northwest Canada. And then an area of low pressure out over the Gulf. We'll be also watching a low out over the western Bering with an occluded front that'll extend eastward, working its way through the central and eastern Aleutians on up into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And eventually energy from that will help spin up below south of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific and lifting up into the Gulf. That'll eventually impact the panhandle as we head into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. But otherwise, the interior with high pressure in place, much colder temperatures, especially there in the early mornings with areas of IFR conditions, Yukon Flats, as well as the Copper River Basin. IFR also out over the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait down into the Bering and central Aleutians. Sunday afternoon, that front makes progress eastward with gusty winds on the back side of it, causing areas of low-level turbulence. And we'll see that front working its way through the eastern Aleutians Sunday afternoon. Still a pocket of IFR up there toward the Yukon Flats, and also in the far southeastern part of the panhandle. For Monday morning, look for IFR conditions still extending out there through the upper Yukon Valley, and on up into the Yukon Flats, as well as in toward the eastern portion of the Copper River Basin, and then extending out across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and through much of the central Bering and along the Aleutian Chain. Monday afternoon, look for the primary IFR conditions holding across the Alaska Peninsula back through the eastern and central Aleutians. Past conditions on Sunday, and AKwx should generally see VFR conditions, as will Adigan. Further south and west, VFR will prevail at Lake Clark and Merrill as well. And then rounding up through the central portion of the Alaska range, VFR conditions rainy through Windy Pass and extending eastward to Isabel, as well as Mentasta. And then further south and west, Tanita, as well as Portage should see VFR conditions prevail, and that will also be the case in the northern Panhandle at Chilkoot and White. Well, freezing levels are down at the surface there into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, down there around Cold Bay and extending off the coast there along the Gulf and into areas of the outer coast of the Panhandle. Freezing levels, though, along and ahead of that particular occluded front there extend upwards to 4 to near 6,000 feet into the central Aleutians. Icing, the greatest potential for icing will be out over the Gulf, just west-southwest there of Haida Gwaii, between 3,000 and 9,000 feet. And then in association with the area of low pressure out over the western Bering, with an occluded front extending eastward from extending down to around St. Paul and then out through the central eastern Aleutians between 5,000 and 15,000 feet, with some pockets between 1,000 and 8,000 feet there in the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula there in the west-northwest coast, and the interior upper Yukon Valley toward the Alcan border between 1,000 and 8,000 feet. Jet stream level, 30,000 foot winds, strongest 135 knot max from the southwest coming onshore through Vancouver, British Columbia. On the backside of low pressure, we do see winds upward of 95 to 125 knots out into the lower southwest Gulf, out of the northwest. And then as we go down to 9,000 feet mid-levels, we see low pressure circulation there in through the Gulf. 40 knot winds coming onshore through British Columbia from the southwest. Backside, 35 knot winds across Kodiak Island and the main areas of the southwest to 35 knots. And then back out over the Aleutian chain, winds in excess of 40, 45 knots, the western half of the Aleutians. And then finally, 3,000 foot level winds are strongest along that occluded front that will be working its way eastward through the eastern Aleutians on Sunday afternoon, upwards to 45 knots from the southwest, shifting west, and then a core of some stronger winds of 45 to 50 knots across the western half of the Aleutian chain. And finally, the greatest threat for considerable moderate to isolated severe turbulence Sunday will be throughout the western half of the Aleutian chain from surface to 3,000 feet, extending eastward as that front works its way eastward through the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula by later Sunday afternoon, between the surface and 4,000 feet. So that wraps it up for your flight weather. Check the latest conditions and forecasts before heading out, and have a safe flight.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources, and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now to look at today's sea ice edge, and it's certainly ice-making weather with the colder air that is in place throughout the entire state. We see extensive ice development along the Arctic and Northwest coast in through the Chukchi Sea, and the Chukchi Sea is definitely beginning to fill in after a little bit of a area there that was a little more open. And the ice continues to build further south along the western and southwestern coast, now showing up all the way down into Bristol Bay, and even a hint or two there up into the north end of Cook Inlet. Otherwise, Sunday's marine forecast for the inner channels of the southeast panhandle. Winds will be out of the north 20 to 30 knots, Petersburg up toward Skagway upwards to 30 knots, 4 to 6 foot waves. And along the coast, winds will be out of the west-southwest, Craig to Sitka, but more offshore out of the east-northeast from north of Sitka through Gustavus and Yakutat at around 20 knots, and waves generally around 6 feet for Monday. Winds will generally become more offshore there through the inner canals out of the north-northeast, as high as 25 knots as we get on up towards Skagway with waves of 4 to 5 feet, and then generally a northwest to west flow at 15 to 20 knots along the outer coast with waves 5 to 8 feet, though it could be as high as 10 feet down toward Craig. South central areas, winds will generally be out of the north offshore flow there, Prince William Sound into Cook Inlet, 25 knots with 4-footers there in Prince William Sound. Out of the north-northwest there at 30 knots, mouth of Cook Inlet, 8-footers, and off the Kenai northwesterly at 25 knots with waves up to 5 feet. On Monday, look for winds to continue offshore flow out of the north-northeast, 10 knots, 2-footers there in Prince William Sound, and as much as 6 to 7 foot waves with north to northeast winds, 20 knots there through the lower half of Cook Inlet. Across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, winds will generally be out of the north, either northwesterly there, Kodiak Island, 25 to 30 knots, waves 5 to 7 feet. And as the occluded front approaches from the eastern Aleutian chain, we'll see the winds turn more southeasterly, 20 to 25 knots, Sandpoint, Cold Bay, and False Pass, waves running about 4 feet. And then on Monday, as that front area, new area low pressure develops south of Sandpoint, we'll see that counterclockwise circulation with northeast winds, Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island, 6-foot waves and 25 to 30 knot northeasterly winds on the Bering side from Bristol Bay down to Cold Bay with 7-footers. Now, Sunday, look for the occluded front to be working its way through the central into the eastern Aleutians. Ahead of it, south winds to 30-35 knots, waves upwards around 11 to 13 feet. At the backside, winds shift around to the west, 25 to 35 knots, and waves generally in excess of about 10 to 14 feet. And then for Monday, across much of the Aleutian chain, winds will be out of the west, 25 to 30 knots, and waves generally 10 to 13 feet on the North Pacific side and 9 to 13 feet on the Bering side. Looking at the west coast, winds will be out of the southeast out over the eastern Bering, 25 to 30 knots, waves anywhere from 7 to 11 feet. Onshore flow out of the west there into Norton Sound with 2-foot waves. And then on Monday, look for winds to be generally offshore from the mainland, northeasterly 15 to 25 knots, and waves as high as 8 to 14 feet extending up from St. Paul, St. George through St. Matthew and south of St. Lawrence. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west-northwest 10 to 15 knots with ice in place. Lower Chukchi Sea, where there are breaks in the ice, we have winds out of the north around 20 knots with waves of 2 to 4 feet. And then on Monday, winds will still remain out of the northwest to west, 15 to 20 knots with ice in place across the Arctic coast. But what remains with any breaks in open water, winds will be out of the north, around 15 knots throughout the lower Chukchi Sea, as high as 25 knots out of the northeast there, just on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, with waves as high there as 10 feet. And here's the weather map. Low pressure on Sunday will be working its way through the central Bering with an occluded front working its way through the eastern Aleutians. Another low over the Gulf, that'll be weakening. A new low will be forming, though, along that occluded front south of the Alaska Peninsula on Monday into Tuesday. And that'll be the next main weather maker that will impact the Panhandle with perhaps several inches of snow later Tuesday into Wednesday. That's all I have for the show tonight. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join me again tomorrow night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.